Golden Doves, class 59, page 24. Accordingly, the Targumic Memra is a semiological rather than a metaphysical entity. Now, we said that God's creations are actually God's speech, right? So God creates by speaking, but he also speaks by creating. So for example, when God, Yoser Or, creates the light, God is speaking these beautiful words, right? So the words are beautiful, right? When you see the sunrise in the morning, Yoser Or, Ubore Hoshech, right? You see beautiful light coming out of the horizon. That's God's speaking. Because at the moment he's creating the light, meaning at that moment God is speaking those words, right? What you're seeing. So therefore, when you see the word memra in the Targum ankelos, right? The memra of God, the speech of God, it's semiological, not metaphysical. So that means that, well, actually, let me read. Memra, the word spoken by God, does not function according to some pre-established order. It establishes the order because in metaphysics, things exist in accordance with an order that is pre-established and in a sense predates the things that exist within that order, right? So, not so with the Word of God. The Word of God itself is creative. The Word of God is what establishes the order because that is the creation. The creation is the order, right? God creates the order. The best example of this is Vayavdel Elohim ben ha'or ben ha'choshech. God separated between light and darkness. What does that mean? Why do you need to separate between light and darkness? And the answer is, that's an order. That's a particular structure. There would be no difference between light and darkness. But for the fact that God differentiated between the two. So you see how God's speech establishes the order, and God's speech establishes the fact that light is not dark and dark is not light, and two opposites cannot exist, right? So it establishes order. More precisely, it is the actual manifestation of God. So the order, the speech of God, is how God manifests himself to his creations, particularly to man. It is through God's speech, meaning through God's creations, that God speaks to us and manifests himself to us. And what do we say? We reply, Yoser Or Ubore Hoshech. So that's us speaking back to God and praising God for his beautiful words. So God has these beautiful words, and then we reply in kind with our beautiful words. Although it occasionally stands for the intellectual aspects of an utterance, memra expresses speech as a dynamic, active force, manifesting God's activities in the realm of both the spiritual and natural phenomena. I'm just going to take a quick look at the footnotes, and I don't believe that I missed anything here. Right, no I did not. Okay, so let me explain that last sentence. Sometimes memra has to do with the intellectual aspect of a particular speech in Aramaic, right? But when used in the context of God, God speaking, the memra of God, it's an Aramaic word for speech, right? It's a dynamic force. Because again, this memra is creating. It's an active force, right? Because it's not that God created and then left. God continues to speak. The speech of God continues. So every morning when the sun rises, that's God speaking. Every time you see a beautiful fruit on the tree, and you pluck the fruit, and before you eat it, they say, Bore feri Look at that word, Bore. He's creating it now. meaning God is speaking now. This is a manifestation of his speech, right? Amazing idea. Because on the one hand, God is so far and distant from us, but on the other hand, through his speech, we can have a constant relationship with God. It's immediate. It's right there. Right? And this is manifesting God's activities in the realm of both spiritual and natural phenomena. Of course, there are spiritual phenomenon. There's malachim, there's seraphim, there's elim, right? And there's, of course, natural phenomena, like the thunder, like the lightning. Like its Aramaic equivalent, the Philonic logos is semiological. So Philo, who my father considered to be one of the great Hachamim, Philo speaks about the logos. So in Greek, you have the logos. The logos is the speech of God. The logos, as used by Philo, is semiological. It's not metaphysical. It's semiological because it is the creative force, as opposed to metaphysical, which would mean that it's somehow subject to forces above it. Right? Metaphysics, we said, the pre-established order of metaphysics. So, I just want to be clear, this is the way Philo uses the word logos. It's not the way other Greek thinkers use the word logos. It's not the way the word logos is used in the New Testament. That's very important. In Platonic thought, the logos is metaphysical. Right here. Okay. Because for Plato, the logos, it gathers, it synthesizes and organizes according to a pre-established order. So there is a pre-established order, there is the logos, which is the word, and the word must act in accordance with that pre-established order. It's almost mechanistic. It is fundamentally static, so therefore it's static. Because it's just going to act in accordance with the order that is above it. In the words of Plato, the logos says how a being is, right? Because metaphysics thinks about existence and the nature of to exist. So what does it mean to be, to exist, right? So the logos tells us how something exists. What is the existence of something? That's why in Greek thinking, for example, the word apple actually has to do with the actual apple, right? So when you utter the word apple, apple is somehow related to the apple, right? In Judaism, there's a signifier, which is the word, and the signified, which is the actual existence, let's call it the object. And the relationship between the signifier and the signified is arbitrary. It's not necessary. You can say keleb, or you can say dog, and the relationship between the signifier and signified is just that, completely arbitrary. There is no better word for dog or for lion, aryeh, right? But in Platonic thinking, the logos is related to the thing. I'm just looking at the footnote here. Footnote number 10 on page 160, the Dialogues of Plato. On the logos as apophensi, that is letting things be seen as they are, because the word is related to the thing, so it opens up the gate to understanding the thing as it really is, right? So there's a book called Language, Meaning, and Existence. Heidegger discusses it. Okay, for a dynamic, okay, that's all I wanted to. For our purposes, that footnote was not necessary. Getting back to the main text on page 24. On the other hand, the Philonic logos is not determined by a pre-established order. It is the ultimate structure containing the totality of ideas. There is no pre-established order. What was there before God spoke, before God created? There was God. There was no order, there was no universe there. Right? Was there light? Well, he would say, no, of course there was no light before God spoke. Was there darkness? Some would say, yeah, there was darkness. Well, no, there was no darkness. Right? Yosir Oru Bore Choshech. God created the darkness. Oh, there was empty space, I guess, right? Actually, no. There was no empty space. God created the idea of there being space. So it was like small. No, actually it wasn't small because there was no size. So what was there? Other than God, nothing. So it's when God creates that there's something. So this order that we have in the world is not pre-established in the Platonic sense of there being these ideals, and these ideas that govern the lower world in accordance with the upper world. No, there was nothing. But when God spoke, He created the various systems and the various structures which orders the universe. So it's the speech that creates the order. And it's not the order that subjects the speech and tells the speech what to do. And furthermore, speech is arbitrary, meaning in the sense that words don't encapsulate the actual object. They're disconnected and arbitrary, right? All right. It like memra, meaning the philonic logos, and again, this is the way Philo uses the word logos, is the instrument by which God created the world. How does God create the world? Bidvar Adonai Shamayim Na'asu, the words of God. His word, which He made use of like an instrument, and so made the world, says Philo. The words are the instruments and the tools that God uses to create. Elsewhere, commenting upon the expression, the house of God, what a beautiful explanation this is. Yaakov Avinu sees Sulam Musab Arsa V'Rosho Magiah Hashamayim. He sees the ladder pointing upwards towards the heavens. And at the end he says, V'yirav Yomad En Zekim Bet Elohim. He says, what I just saw is the house of God. What is that house of God? Philo writes the following words. Who then can that house be, save the word Logos, who is antecedent to all that has come into existence? This Bet Elohim is that which is before the creations. What is the Bet Elohim? It's the Logos, it's the Word of God. The word which the helmsman of the universe grasps as a rudder to guide all things on their course. So you imagine God is the captain and He has a merkabah, but instead of the merkabah we speak of a ship. And He uses the rudder of the ship, which is the word, to guide the creation. So you can imagine God guiding the merkabah and speaking and creating. Even as when He was fashioning the world, He employed it as His instrument. As God is fashioning, shaping the world, Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz, He uses the words, and the creations are as God says them. That the fabric of His handiwork might be without reproach. Also that the speech of God is perfect. The creations of God are completely perfect. Right? Vaychulu hashamayim v'ha'aretz v'chol. They are complete in every way. Since the Logos functions as the laws of nature, it is very close to the Greek mind. Philo's preference for Logos rather than for a term such as the soul or mind of the world as used by the sophists clearly indicates that he wanted a term semantically equivalent to the biblical dabar and ibra, The Greeks think of the soul of the world, people speak of Mother Nature. No. Philo wanted the word logos, because here we see that Philo was a rabbinic thinker and was expressing ideas that are within the context of rabbinic tradition, right? So he views logos and memra, or in Aramaic memra, in Hebrew ma'amar, right? All these are the semiological views of the world that say the world is a perfect speech. God is speaking to you right now. And you're welcome to answer God by saying a Mizmor Tehillim, or by praying, or by making up your own composition.